it's TheFrXion here, Tank12. How you call me? I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks. We're today reviewing the AMX 1390, and I want to shorten this first half a little bit because I think you certainly want to see the gameplays and you want to see what this tank is capable of on the battlefield. But before we do that, let's jump into some of the characteristics. This is the Tier 9 French light tank, and finally you're back with the 13 chassis, and you have this beautiful 90mm gun. It's the 90mm F3M. This gun provides you with a little bit of firepower that you prior didn't have with the Batchat 12T. Now don't get me wrong, the 75mm gun certainly had its charms, but the 90mm gun does almost everything better. And the rate of fire is fairly similar to the one that you had on the Batchat 12T. So let's take a look at the shell types that we have available here. First, APCR, second APCR, but the premium edition, and finally a high explosive shell. All of them have pretty decent shell velocity, but the APCR shells that you fire as premium rounds, they are a bit disappointing since they don't get more shell velocity than the standard APCR shells. But having 1,163 meters per second shell velocity is really, really good. But let's take a look at the damage potential and the average penetration. So the damage is 240 about normal roll, and 300 max 180 min roll. Now the average penetration is 205 millimeters, and since these are APCR shells, they will actually lose penetration depending on how far away you are. You can see 205 millimeters with the standard APCR shell, or 248 with the premium one. So that is an increase by about 40 millimeters, and that does certainly give you a little bit of a boost. But I did still decide to run mainly more standard APCR shells than premium shells, but maybe you want to reverse that and run a few more premium shells than just these APCR shells. One major downside is that you have 40 shells, and that sounds like actually quite a lot, and you can actually reload 10 times since you have 4 rounds in your magazine. But the issue is just like, if you have a really long game, you run out of ammo quite quickly. I have run out of ammo in this tank quite a few times, but it does help that you have higher average damage than the 75mm gun. So the rate of fire is actually not too bad. It's 8.82 rounds per minute. 20 second reload time with Brothers in Arms, with a good crew, with, right here, improved ventilation. The in-between intra-clip reload is 2.21 seconds, so it's still going to take you a bit to fully get all the shells out of your gun. But in the end, for a light tank at tier 9, you have quite a lot of firepower and you have a lot of potential damage. You know, that's 4 times 240 damage, that's almost 1,000 damage that you can do in a single clip. Now, the gun traverse is also quite good, 52.55, that is with some boosters there, but the standard gun traverse or turret traverse is somewhere along the lines of 48, and that's pretty damn good. Now, once again, biggest downsides for the entirety of the French light tank line is the gun depression and the gun elevation angle. Only 6 degrees of gun depression, 12 degrees of gun elevation. But you have some decent aim time, 2.3 seconds for a fully aimed in reticle, and your accuracy is actually quite astonishingly good, 0.33 or 0.35 if you're not using any consumables or Brothers in Arms. DPM is also not too shabby for a tier 9 light tank with an autoloader, 2116, that's certainly something you can work with. So the only real big difference from the AMX 1375 is this 90mm gun. And this 90mm gun all of a sudden catapults a really good chassis and a good platform into a really great platform. A platform that can really fight back, but still is not as survivable as other light tanks. Only 1,200 hit points, 50mm, like the armor layout is still the same essentially from the tier 5 and the tier 6. And it's not going to change. You're going to get blasted by everything, so we don't have to talk about survivability at all. Mobility-wise, this tank does improve upon the engine power. Now, the 1375 was already quite good, but the tank itself has got an even better engine, 470 horsepower, and you can see that the top speed 64 kph going forwards, 23 in reverse. These numbers are great, and also the specific power to weight ratio is also great, 30.93 horsepower per ton. You're going to be accelerating really quickly, and you don't have to worry about not being able to get from one place to another. You're always going to be really, really mobile with this vehicle. Now, moving on to traverse speed. This tank does traverse fairly nicely, and I have the feeling that when you're turning this vehicle, it is actually a lot more reactive than the Batchat 12T, and I think that turning this vehicle on one spot is also a lot more comfortable. I'm not really sure if does it have neutral steering. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that the turn time has become quite a bit better. At least when I think of the Batchat 12T, it always irritated me because the Batchat 12T took a long time to get into these positions and to turn itself. And I think it has to do with the tracks. Sadly, concealment does drop off a little bit. I don't have all of the crew members with a lot of or equipped with concealment, with the concealment skill, so I probably am going to be using the natural cover or just a concealment skill right here in the tab if I have the opportunity. And yeah, if you use that, you can see 34%. It's not as good as the AMX 1375. It drops off a little bit, and I'm also not using any equipment right now that will boost the concealment by a large amount. The improved ventilations does help, but it's not going to be that much of an improvement in terms of concealment as, you know, CamoNet would be, or for example, low noise exhaust system, which is also another piece of item that I would probably pick if I would take away the improved ventilation. Spotting wise, this tank does get a better improved turret, at least in terms of view range. You have 380 meters view range, which is still not that great considering that it's a tier 9 light tank. But if you have the bounty optics or just optics on your vehicle, if you have your crew trained in the view range department, situational awareness and recon, you're going to have 484 meters view range as well as when you're going to be using coffee. And with this, you should be able to spot a majority of the tanks. You're not going to be the best spotter out of all of the tier 9 light tanks, but you are going to be the one that can fight back the best, almost the best, in my opinion. So your natural enemy, what is going to be your natural enemy? High explosive shells is going to be your natural enemy. That also entails the T49 that used to be your biggest rival back in the days. I'm not really sure if that is still the case. I have not seen a lot of T49s running around with the big howitzer gun. That must have probably had to do with the fact that Wargaming did nerf the high explosive shells quite a bit. So let's talk about the equipment and the field modifications real quick. So about the equipment, I went with improved ventilations to give me basically buffs to every single category, because I do use this tank also in combat. You'll see that in the gameplay. Vertical stabilizer to give me less dispersion when I'm turning my tank or when I'm moving. Also bounty coated optics that I haven't upgraded, but they will give me a bit of better view range. So that's what I would pick. This is like the go-to choice for players who are very cautious with their spendings. You could obviously always make two different setups for the ones where you are in a city or where you intend to fight, and the other slot where you intend to scout. So taking a look at the field modifications, we can see I would go for more top speed, because you are going to have like 2 kph more going forward, and you already have like such good specific power to weight ratio. You don't need more. You wouldn't need more space, but more speed, but I think it would be the biggest benefit if you get like 2 more horsepower per ton on top of the 30 that you already have. That doesn't make a big difference. Also, the 66 kph is not that huge of a step up from a 64 kph, but still, you know, getting you to that spot faster with the same kind of acceleration, that's still like pretty damn good. Now, I would go for aiming mechanism tuning. I know that the DPM goes down a little bit, but your accuracy goes up, and I think, you know, in a light tank, having the highest rate of fire is maybe not the most important part. The rate of fire is still fairly good, even with 21.22 seconds for a fully loaded clip, so I would go for the aiming mechanism. Then finally here, it depends on if you get fired on by HE a lot. Usually I just think that, well, when I get shot by artillery or tanks with high explosive, I usually already messed up. So I'm just going to go with this to get me more reverse speed, that when I get spotted, I can still reverse out of the situation. Having a 26 kph is great, but I understand if you're someone who wants to have more protection, but kind of doesn't make any sense because this tank doesn't have any protection at all. Then finally, right here, you have the choice between anti-reflective headlight coating or external vision system, which gives you better view range, but at the cost of concealment. Now, I would pick the one, the one modification where you have the equipment piece loaded in, which is basically if you have like the coated optics, I would go for external vision system, because no, actually not external vision system. I would go for anti-reflective headlight coating, because you will need the extra concealment and you'll go down a little bit in terms of spotting, but it's not going to be as bad if you go towards like external vision system and you're just going to get 2 times like a minus on your concealment. Having said all of that, let's take a look at some gameplay and see why the AMX 1390 is probably my favorite tank in the tier 9 light tank sphere. Let's see, where are we going? We're playing a tier 9, tier 8 matchup. This is an ideal gameplay, or not an ideal gameplay, but an ideal scenario for when you are playing an AMX 1390. Being top tier, it would be better if we had more tanks with more HP, preferably tier 9, tier 10, but having a 1390 against some tier 8s is also very fun, because this is basically where you can get most out of your gun. This is where the gun really works without having to rely on premium ammunition, and I think this gameplay really just kind of encompasses what this tank is really all about. We're playing on Live Oaks, also known as North America, on the replay file, and I just, damn it, I was eating peanuts prior, right? And I just swallowed half a peanut while I was eating. So, yeah, very unfortunate. Almost died there. But yeah, we're playing a very, like, aggressive kind of passive scout, if that makes any sense. A scout that moves quite far forward, is trying to see where the enemies are, and is trying to have an impact on the few tanks that are behind him. So right here we spot the Vipera, we also see the TS5, but the Vipera is in a very good position for our tanks at the back. And because we know that the ELC even 90 actually went into the town, which is a really weird decision for a light tank, we decide to move backwards and use this bush until it is fully rendered to put one shot into the Vipera. We know that there are quite a few tank destroyers, and usually quite a few of them like to camp the E2, E3 area. And I also know that the AMX 1390, my direct opposition on the enemy team, is down at the tracks. So this means for me personally that I can actually get even more forward, that I can be really aggressive, because there is almost no tank that can rival me in terms of view range. Now, I obviously know that we have tanks at E2, E3, we have tanks at G5, G4. These are the spots that tanks usually sit. Not G5, but G4 certainly. So, what I notice is that the city right there on the enemy's behalf is extremely empty. There's only a TS5 in there. We have the Vipera almost down to only like 12% of HP. And we have quite a few tanks supporting us right behind us. So that allows me, in this scenario, to move forward, also get shot by an Oho that I didn't know was there, and to, you know, proceed to a position where I can actually dictate if I want to peek or not. Like, this building over there was a little bit too, it was too open for me. But right here you can see the beauty of the 1390. This is the reason why I love this tank so much. Okay, Steam, obviously, great. But ignore that. But this is the reason why I love this tank so much, because having the ability to run this 90mm gun is just awesome. And being able to do like 249 damage with a single shot is always very, very well liked. You can see, because we have such good view range, such good camo values, we can just sit here, spot these guys, be quite aggressive, while at the same time we are cautiously waiting for any proxy spotting by the ELC even 90 or the UDAS over there. But because I really want to get my gun into action, I want to get more damage, I decide to actively engage that Scorpion G. And that Scorpion G was actually completely taken out by us because we hit him like, I think it was 7 times. And yeah, that's the beauty of this tank. You can see when you're playing aggressive as a scout like we are, we're able to get into their face. But once more, one of the major downsides of the tank becomes very apparent, and that is that you lack any form of protection. But obviously you can forego protection for all of the other great features. You're fast, you have decent view range, you have a great gun, your gun handling is pretty great as well. Yeah, what else would you want to have in a light tank? Having protection is, in my opinion, secondary. But right here you can see this ELC even 90 already pretty damn, what do you call it? Ballsy. He was pretty ballsy with his first run, but it turns out that he survived that run. But thankfully the SU-130 PM knocks him out and allows us to survive that engagement. But I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a look at this gun and just how much fun it is to be used, and why you have to like really be cautious when you're playing this as a light tank, because you do not want to be constantly firing your gun as a light tank because you're going to lose your camo value. But you can see just how well this gun works and just how good the gun handling is on the vehicle itself. So it's a lot of fun when you're shooting things. It's also a lot of fun when you're passively scouting things. So it combines basically 2 worlds into one, where the tank itself is really, really competitive, and it's capable of being really good against any form of opposition as long as you play it to its strength. And its strengths certainly are the 90mm gun, the 4 rounds that you carry with you. You can always be very dangerous to lightly armored tanks, also other light tanks. They have to be extremely cautious. They always think twice about pushing you. And on the other hand, you're also quite fast. So if you need to get out of a position in a hurry, you can always do that. One of the major downsides, on the other hand, is sadly just the lack of any real protection and no good gun elevation or gun depression angles. But I'd say we go into the next game, we'll look at what this tank is capable of at tier 10. Yeah, turns out replays are broken because they released a micro patch and the old replays are not working anymore. So I have to be faster with, you know, making the videos. So we're just gonna do this live, live gameplay, live action commentary, and we're actually playing on Ghost Town. So my thought process when I play this light on this map is that I want to have the best sightlines and I want to be the most effective for my team. And I am a little bit worried because I'm going to the same direction, the same place that the G-Sor is currently. So it might just be a little bit of too much scouting in one direction. But this is a very important kind of place to put some pressure on. We could also help the G-Sor out. We could support him. But yeah, I'm quite confident in the ability of my light tank, and that I'm capable of spotting. Uh, Now, this is a tier 9, tier 10 matchup, but they're only like 3 tier 10s, and majority of the enemy vehicles are actually tier 8, so if we play our cards right, we should be able to go right through here undetected and hopefully not stumble into another light tank, like another AMX 1390. But right there, we actually move forward, we spot a Minotauro. Very special placement of the Minotauro. There's the T-54 lightweight, and I think at the same time we should be able to also have some eyes on this Löwe, just in case somebody wants to shoot him. Now the issue here is that this T-54 lightweight could become a little bit of a problem. He does seem to be quite erratic with his movements, and it looks like that he's going to be sitting next to the boat there, which is good for us because we'll know that he's going to be right there. Now, when you're in such a forward position, what is really important whenever you play light tanks is that you look at the bush and you look at exactly the places where there are like gaps. Sometimes some bushes are not exactly very thick, and when you're trying to use these bushes as like, you know, like really good cover, you want to be extremely cautious when you move through them. Now, as a light tank, you're not going to have any, you know, malice or minus points when you're moving, because your your concealment while moving and while stationary is exactly the same. You just do not want to fire. If you fire in this situation right there, like if I open fire on the Löwe, that would be the dumbest thing I could do. I would get lit up by the Löwe, and I would get lit up by everyone else. Everyone would be shooting me, the Minotauro and the T-54 lightweight. So I have to be really cautious right here because I don't want to expose myself too much. And that was really close because my rear was actually sticking out a bit, but just went well. I'm backing up slowly but surely because I want to get some eyes on the T-54 lightweight, because I know that that guy is like still right there. And you have to be really cautious because like if just a little bit of your turret is sticking out, you will get spotted. Now it's a bit of a weird situation right here because it looks like the other side of the map has opened up quite a bit. Our light tanks or medium tanks are actually putting quite a bit of pressure on them, and at the same time we just lit up the artillery piece right there. I'm not sure if the Renegade or if anyone is actually aware of the fact that artillery is moving, but nobody shot him so far. Now that's another thing when you're playing a light tank. Getting spots is great. Getting into positions where you're able to spot like incoming tanks is also really good. Now that's exactly your job. Your job is to spot vehicles, and your job is to see where the enemies are. Now one of the major issues that we have though currently, unfortunately for us, is that nobody really is engaging the targets that we are lighting up for them. So we know there's a Cobra, nobody can really shoot that guy right there, so he's kind of out of the equation. But we have a T-54 lightweight, we have a Minotauro at the back, and to be able to shoot these tanks, well, my team needs to get into a better position. So it's a bit awkward, it's a bit odd, and sadly sometimes, even though you're in a good spotting position, you cannot always predict the way that the battle goes. And I expected a bit more fight from the enemy team, and also expected them to be at least like for my team to be a bit more aggressive in the way that they push the field. But still, nonetheless, I don't want to complain too much. There's an artillery piece right here, but I'm just going to be putting one shell in, and I'm just going to back off because I don't want to get hit by the Minotauro. And getting that Minotauro like tracked in the end is probably the best thing that happened to us here. because we get a whole bunch of assistance damage. So in the end, it still was kind of worth it. Don't get blasted by artillery. But yeah, sometimes things just don't really work out the way they're supposed to. But like the end is always relevant, because as you could see, we got like the majority of the the hit points of the Minotauro. Basically, we took away half of all like 500 HP by tracking and doing damage to him, and we got some assistance as well. So that was quite nice. And yeah, if I would have to rate the AMX 1390, this is certainly one of my favorite light tanks of like in general. I think it's a great tank. I think it has all of the things that light tank players love, and it just combines it with such a nice 90mm gun. This is a great 90mm gun. It's so much fun to deal damage, to shoot tanks, and to roll around and flank vehicles. And I just think it's a great package that has just one major downside, that is the lack of gun depression and the lack of gun elevation. Armor, I'm not even going to count, because it is basically just tier 9 light tank that doesn't have any armor, and that's kind of what you sign up for. But gun elevation, gun depression, if this tank had more gun elevation, a little bit more gun depression, maybe say 7 gun depression, 7 degrees, and about 14 to 15 degrees of gun elevation, this would be a whole different story. This would be a really, really great tank by that point. But in this kind of setup, I would give it a 9.5 out of 10. I know my ratings are fairly high, considering you know, that it does have a one downside, but I really love my French light tanks, and I'm really biased in several ways. Either way, I hope you guys did enjoy, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Until then,